Hey guys, welcome back to CC Home and Garden. So in today's video, we're going to be planting our tomatoes. I'm super excited. We finally are transitioning them from the indoors to the outdoors. So we started our tomatoes about a month and a half ago. I thought this would just be a perfect opportunity just to kind of go over some basics, and growing tomatoes is something that we've done for several years, and I feel like we've perfected a really great way to do it. And I wanted to show you guys, the fertilizers that I use and how I prep our plants before I get them in the ground. But before we get started, I just wanted to go over some basics with you guys, because I know a lot of people are starting to grow tomatoes and veggies for the first time this year. So that's super exciting. And if you are doing a veggie garden and you haven't picked up some tomatoes yet, I highly recommend it, because they're so fun to grow, and it's super rewarding too. But let's just go over some of the basics first. So there's going to be three categories of tomatoes. There's going to be the indeterminate, the determinate, and then the dwarf compact versions, which can be either indeterminate or determinate. So the indeterminate tomatoes are the ones that get really big. So they just continuously grow throughout the season. They can get up to 10 feet tall or long, if you allow them to, and they bloom for a really long time. So we had our indeterminate tomatoes bloomed or produced fruit up until November last year, I believe. So it was pretty late. We had a pretty mild, fall and winter. So we were still harvesting tomatoes up in November. So that's pretty good. So with the determinate tomatoes, those are bred to just get to a certain size, and then they kind of stop at that point. Those are really good to grow in containers. I have grown indeterminate before in containers, which you can do. You just want to make sure you have a nice secure tomato cage for them so they have support. But mostly people will grow the determinate varieties in containers. Now with the compact and the dwarf varieties, those are really good for containers. I've even actually seen people grow them in baskets. So there's some varieties that you can grow that kind of just trail over. And those typically just cap off at 2 to 3 feet. So there are two types of tomatoes that you can buy. You can get the heirloom varieties or the hybrid varieties. So heirlooms are going to be the ones that have been bred for over 50 years. They're really hardy. They're delicious. I love growing heirloom tomatoes. They're my personal favorite. And then the hybrid ones are basically just tomatoes that they've, bred together, and they've picked, the best traits from each tomato plant. And then they'll make this, great hybrid that are, they're more resistant to disease. They are bred to produce more tomatoes, those types of things. And usually the tag will tell you whether they're heirloom or a hybrid. So when you're planting your tomatoes, you want to make sure you have a good space for them, and you want to make sure that you plant them in an area that they're going to get a lot of sun. They love sun. So the more sun that you can give them, the better. I typically would recommend at least 8 hours a day for them to really just grow at an optimal, to their optimal ability. But yeah. So now when you get your tomatoes in the ground, I'm going to show you guys some of the fertilizers that I use. But you want to make sure that you're going to be watering your plants consistently. So some people do recommend you water, do a deep water 2 to 3 times a week. But with me, I've always had really good luck just watering them every single day. So I usually do that in the morning when I'm watering some of our other plants. It's worked for me. I'm definitely going to get our beds on drip next year. We're going to be moving all of our beds back in our garden. So there's no drip to them right now, but we will next year. So if you can get drip to them and give them consistent watering, that's great. If not, then you just want to have a set schedule. Because what happens is if you allow your tomato plants to go too dry, and then all of a sudden you give them a lot of water, and they're going to drink that water up really fast, and they're going to just start splitting. So that's when you see those splits in tomatoes. That's usually what happens. And when you're watering, you're going to want to just water at the base of your plants. You don't want to water above or get the leaves wet, because you're going to cause diseases. So you can get mildew, you can get rust. So you just want to avoid doing that. Now, as far as other diseases go, tomatoes are known for getting it's just basically when the bottom of the tomato just starts getting brown. And when that happens, you really can't reverse that process. But how you can prevent it is by giving your tomato plants calcium. I'll show you guys what I use when I plant our tomatoes to prevent those types of things from happening. But even though you might give your tomatoes calcium, you want to make sure they're consistently watered, because if they're not, and you have calcium in the soil, if they're not able to uptake that calcium properly, then the disease is still going to occur. Another thing you want to keep in mind with tomatoes is you want to make sure that you keep them trimmed up. A lot of the times the tomatoes will grow these sucker branches, and I'll throw up a picture so you guys can see what that looks like. But basically it's going to be this branch that grows from the axial leaf, and if you allow that to grow, that's going to become a plant on its own. So it's going to basically suck away all of the energy from your main stem just to try to grow this other plant. So what you want to do is just kind of pinch those off. And none of our tomatoes have any suckers right now because they're still pretty young, but we'll do a part 2 video of this so you guys can see kind of the progress of our tomatoes and some of the things that we do during their growth season. But I think that's it for now. Let me turn my camera around. Let me show you the fertilizers that I use, and then I'll show you the plants that we're going to be planting today, and we'll do a little bit of prep work before we get those in the ground. So here we go. Okay, so with each plant that I'm going to be planting, I'm going to start off with a scoop of the Biotone Starter Fertilizer from Espoma. I've talked about this before in our fertilizing video if you have any questions about it. So in addition to that, I'm going to be putting in some of this garden lime also from Espoma. Now this is going to help with that end blossom rot. I do this every year, and I haven't had a problem with having that disease. So I'll do a scoop of this, a little bit of this, and I think that will be good to start them off with. And now in about 2 weeks, I'm going to come in with the Tomato Tone, again also from Espoma, and I'll just add a little bit of it on the top of each plant, and then just kind of work that into the soil. And then I'll apply this 2 times a month until August. That's what they recommend. So that's what I'll be doing. In about, I would say 3 weeks or so, I'm gonna start watering all of our tomatoes, or feeding all of our tomatoes with some of this fish fertilizer. Let me see if I can focus on that for you guys. So this fish fertilizer is just a liquid fertilizer, and what I like to do is I'll water our plants with it every other week until probably, I would say, September or so. This is just going to continuously feed them. I know a lot of people will say like, oh, these numbers are a little bit too high and you're just going to promote a lot of vegetative growth, but I challenge you on that because tomatoes are really, really hungry. So again, I'll throw up some pictures of our plants last year, but you'll see just how big and beautiful our plants are and how healthy they are and how many tomatoes they produce. It's pretty incredible. So I definitely recommend this. All of these things can be purchased online. I will put a link down below in case you guys are interested in ordering some of that. But now before we get planted, let me just go ahead and show you a little bit of prep work that I do to our plants before we get them in the ground. There it is. Aren't they so cute? So when you buy your plants, or if you've already started your plants inside, before you put them in the ground, you're going to want to cut some of these bottom leaves. So these bottom leaves they're kind of spent. They're kind of the older ones. So what I like to do is I go in with these little trimmers and I just cut these back, and I'll probably leave this guy and of course the top ones. Now with tomato plants, unlike other veggies, you're going to want to plant them really deep. Let me see if I can get a little bit closer and you guys can see. Let's see if it'll focus. So do you see all of those little hairs on there? So all of those little hairs are potential roots. So when you plant your tomatoes in deep, what's going to happen is you're going to get, instead of getting this much root growth, you're going to get this much more. So when you plant them in the ground, I'll plant them probably 1/2 inch to 1 inch below the lowest leaf. So again, the deeper you plant them, the hardier they're going to become, the stronger they're going to become, and just the more roots they're going to have. So don't be afraid to plant them deep. You want to plant them deep. So let's just go ahead and get these planted. Okay guys, so I dug my hole, and again, you want the soil level just to come maybe like 1/2 inch to 1 inch below the lowest leaf. And I do like to use these rings in our bed. So we're going to be planting 24 tomatoes, and each bed has 12 of these rings, and they're perfectly spaced apart. I know that because I measured. I just love the way that this looks, and when I'm watering, it keeps all of the water and the soil going to just the tomato. You will see in our bed we have also strawberries planted here because I accidentally bought 80 strawberry plants, and I needed more space to grow them, and I didn't want to put them in my flower bed, so I'm putting them with our tomatoes. So that's what these are. So you put that in your tomato and you measure it out, and then you're going to do a scoop of the espoma starter fertilizer, and then you're going to add a little pinch of the lime, and then you just mix that in. And then I'm just going to tear this little cup apart. That's the great thing about these biodegradable cups, is they just peel right off. And I just take another look. That looks good. And then I'm going to come back and backfill with some good organic planting soil. And I like to kind of freshen the top layer every year. So just do that. Kind of just pack it down a little bit. Make sure it's nice and straight. Just like that. So now I'm gonna just flip my camera around and I'll plant the remaining plants. Here we go. We got all 24 plants planted, and now I'm just going to go in and water them in with the seaweed extract. You can get this at most nurseries, but again, I'll put a link down below in case you guys want to order this as well. But again, the seaweed is just going to help with any transplant shock that you know the plant just went through by transplanting these or transplanting them into the beds. And then it'll also just help, you know, feed those roots and get them going. So for 2 gallons, I did 4 caps, and then I usually add that first, and then I'll add in my water so it can kind of mix in as I'm adding in the water from the pressure of the hose. So let's get these watered in. All right, guys, so we have them planted, they're watered in, so they're good to go. In about 2 weeks or so, I'll come in and I'll do my first application of the tomato tone, like I mentioned before. And at that moment, that's when I'll put in the tomato cages as well. You can do them now, but I just like to give them a couple of weeks since they're pretty small. I think I forgot to mention the varieties that we're growing just because I was overly excited. So let me just kind of go over the list that, of the ones that we planted today. So we have the Cherokee Green, the Yellow Brandy Wine, the Prunes Purple, the Black Creme, and the 5-Star Grape. So that's a cherry tomato, and I've heard that those are like the best cherry tomatoes. So I'm super, super excited to try them out. I also grew 2 other varieties that I didn't plant today, but those are gonna be just for friends and family. And that was the Sun Gold tomato, and those are another cherry tomato, and they're yellow. They're super sweet, they're like candy. And then we also grew a striped German, which is, to me, it's more of like a tangy flavor. I love them. I grew them last year, but again, this year I just wanted to try all new varieties. Again, we will be posting a video of an update on our plants. So if you have any questions between now and then, please feel free to comment down below. I have a lot of really great resources, and I love helping and teaching and sharing with you guys some of my knowledge. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching today's video, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.